Dr. Andrew, welcome to the show. Pleasure having you today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. Just to kind of get the listeners familiar with your work, how would you describe, in the simplest terms, what it is that you do?
We love kids. We are fighting for kids' health. That's what we are doing.
Is there something in particular that sort of gave you a light bulb moment that you decided to go into this career path?
I discovered while I was practicing as a physician that there are many things that shouldn't come to the hospital that were largely preventable. But the emergency room was always full, and doctors are always overwhelmed with the cases that come to the hospital. Now, this disease or these conditions have taken some time to develop, and many of them are not trauma cases. They are not accidents. They are not things that are like falls that breaks the bone and things like that. But they are preventable disease conditions, and some of them are non-communicable diseases, like diseases that are metabolic, either obesity, diabetes, and things like that. When I discovered the sequence of events in the emergency room, I figured out that somehow there is a lack of public health education that keeps the population healthy and prevents certain things. But public health education is also connected to evidence in science. If the evidence in science is not strong enough, the information we have will be weak because the people will not want to believe in it. So I felt like it is important first to gather sound evidence that can improve the public's confidence in science. So much that when we now tell them the recommendation or lifestyle to change as a result of the scientific evidence that we have proven, it is easier for them to follow because that is, in quotes, the truth. So I said, well, if that is the way to go, then I have to acquire skills that will make me to gather the evidence. So I went into research and I left clinical practice. And I really wanted to focus not on adults, but on kids. The reason being that kids are tomorrow's adults. You get two benefits when you focus on kids. You get the benefit now, you also have the benefit for the future. For adults, you only have one benefit, and that is the now. They don't have a future anymore. They're already there.
Mhm.
So for the kids, if we understand how to keep them healthy, how to prevent especially non-communicable diseases, because that is what the global burden of health is, global burden of diseases in the world is non-communicable. So if we can prevent this thing and delay the first occurrence of this condition, then we have saved money, we have saved life, we have saved employment, we have saved a lot of things. So I began to look for data that looked at children from childhood until they became young adults, and looking at the parameters of their life, variables in their life, whether it's physical activity measured with a device, blood pressure, either it's cholesterol level, the DEXA measurement, X-ray measurement of the content of the fat in the body, fat content, muscle content, as the case may be, and how they were measured as they were growing from childhood to adolescence until young adults, and how we see normal children start picking up trajectory towards disease formation.
Hmm.
That is not quite common. And thankfully, we have a beautiful data set in the UK from the University of Bristol, the children of the 90s data, that have spent millions of pounds from 1990, when their mothers were pregnant. They were enrolled, about 15,000 of them were enrolled into the clinic as soon as they were born. Now they're about 35 years of age now. Data is being
Hmm.
collected from them. So we have that vast data set. So I approached them, and then we negotiated, and then I had access to a few variables, about maybe 1,000 out of the 90,000 they have. And I began to work on these. One, what I began to discover started surprising me. Two, I began to question the knowledge in my own medical textbooks, because the result I see is completely different from what my textbook is saying. Three, I began to realize that there is no need to wait until 40 years to do some regular checkup, because the damage has begun 20 years earlier. Now started thinking that we are missing great opportunity for prevention. Hence, the emergency room is overwhelmed by the middle age population, because something was happening in their young adulthood. We felt like they don't have any problem. Because a child is jumping up and down does not mean there is no problem. You have to look. So that has changed my orientation about what public health education is about. And it also opens my understanding to the missed opportunities that we have to prevent diseases. I have now been able to see that in a healthy child born normally, there is a time point when physiology deviates into pathology. That is when normal function deviates into disease state. There is a time when traveling on the road of normalcy deviates just gradually. Now, at the very beginning, the gradual deviation is slight, but after a few years, it becomes so wide.
Hmm.
That point, when there was a slight deviation, that is the point where we need to create a bypass and bring it back to normalcy.
Mm. While it's still close.
And that point is by late adolescence to early young adulthood. So at the end of teenage years, towards mid-20s. Very critical. It's very interesting that that is also the time when children are liberated from their parents. So when they come out of the house and they feel like where they are now adult of their life, they can decide that is also the time they are collecting passport for disease condition.
Hmm.
Those are the things I have found out. Yeah, they are very interesting.
Yeah, I think there's so many different angles where to start approaching this. So, from all the data that was collected, from the data sets that you were able to revise, what were some of the findings that were mainly surprising to you about the development of pathologies in kids?
First, I was surprised to discover that Children sit 6 hours every day, sedentary, not doing anything relevant. But they also run around aimlessly for the exact 6 hours every day. So that means that it cancels out. They are sitting down, cancels out, they are running around, or vice versa. The effect of their sitting down is cancelled by their aimless jumping around. By the time these same children become young adults in their 20s, they sit or they are sedentary for 9 hours, and then they only aimlessly move around for 3 hours. That balance has been tilted. 9 hours sitting, sedentary, to only 3 hours in physical activity. The gap now is 6 hours of extra sedentariness. That's where disease condition begins.
Mm.
When they were in childhood, they sit 6 hours, they play around 6 hours. In fact, the parent will say, sit down, sit down, sit down. You are jumping too much. Can't you just stay quiet? Leave them alone.
Yeah.
They are canceling away their sedentariness. We shouldn't reinforce sedentariness into their system. It is natural to jump around.
That's very interesting. The current way of raising children, well, if we point out the specific data sets that came out of the UK of children that were born in the 90s, the way kids were being raised in the 90s, I was raised in the 90s, in the early 90s, I think it's very different to the way that it is now. How do you see all the findings that you have found in parallel to the current tendencies that we have now? Because I would like to argue that when I was growing up as a kid, the problem was, how can I keep that kid inside and not so much on the street so much? Whereas now it seems to me that part of the issue is, how can I get my kids outside? So there is already like a shift in values. There's like a shift in differences of parenting. So I'm just trying to understand, how has the parenting strategies changed over time from the 90s up until now, and how are those parenting strategies also affect your field, for example, if we are going to be focusing on improving the quality of life of humans, I mean, in essence, but obviously starting with kids. So what are the basic things that we should start understanding before actually starting to implement maybe new practices of parenting, or understanding what are the biological needs of children, for example?
Thank you for that. The outcome of the research will not materially be different from one generation to another. It's only that the evidence gets stronger if the factors that promote disease is found in another generation more than the other. So if we say in the 90s, perhaps is a better generation than now, if we are considering sedentariness, then the result we have seen is just a scratch of the surface. If we are to replace the generation with the current generation now, that might be that they will spend in childhood 9 hours per day sitting down and only 3 hours, because everybody still has 24 hours. Either you were born in 1990 or 2022, you will still have 24 hours in a day. That one will not change. Yeah. So, but what will change is that the consequences of sedentariness that we found in the generation of this will not be as serious as the consequence now. Because if we spend more time sedentary, what happens is that it drives an increase in fat mass. So obesity in childhood will be increased now, consequent on the fact that they spend more time sitting down. Not only that, we're likely to have an increase in elevated blood pressure in the generation 20 years after the 1990 generation. Why? Because they sit down more. We have observed that sedentariness drives high blood pressure, drives cholesterol level, drives obesity, drives inflammation, drives insulin resistance. These are the factors at an arterial stiffness as well as cardiac damage. These are factors that eventually culminate into cardiac disease, type 2 diabetes, liver fat, and things like that. So if in a population that was born 35 years ago, we are seeing this result, then if we take the population now, then you know that it is a disaster. But what happens is this. We use the evidence of 35 years ago, we use the evidence of 15 years ago to correct our behavior now. That is the lesson we learn. Here it is. Now we understand that since we have 24 hours in a day, children will go to school and come back. It's normal. If they sit 6 hours in a day, then we should expect them to play around for 6 hours. If we see that that balance is tilting, then we now know that the consequences are these: blood pressure, elevation, obesity, poor cholesterol level, and things like that. So what do? We take responsibility. We say, well, we're in a jet age. Everything is fast food, fast this, fast that. Instant noodles, instant everything. You tell your, well, if you sit down this long, and the next thing is that I order for you pizza or fast food, instant this, I have further contributed to the damaging of your health. So what do? Let's go to the store. Let's go and buy fresh food. So you break the sedentariness of the child, and you give the child responsibility in the store to pick nice food, to go home and cook together with you. Not that the child will be playing video games somewhere, mommy is sweating out in the kitchen. There's nothing like that. You create a participatory model. Because these children will only be children for a while. You can only mold them within a time frame. After that, they become independent adults. And when you talk to them, they will say, well, they have heard, but they will do something else.
Yeah. I wonder if part of the problem that we have now is a lack of understanding in the past of what it means to have a healthy child. If I think of my personal experience, so to give a little bit of context, I grew up in Mexico, right? And even though I grew up in a very poor area, obviously resources sometimes were lacking. But if I remember the conversations that my grandmother would have about what it means to be healthy, is that was that like a little chubby kid was a healthy kid, right? I mean, I remember maybe like as a 6 or 7 year old, like I had a belly, right? And whenever you would see like a kid without a belly, you would say, no, he's too skinny. He's not healthy. He's probably sick. So I think that's maybe one of the first maybe wrong ideas of what it means to be healthy. And I'm just wondering from the work that you have done, where did that belief come from to think that slightly overweight kids are healthy?
You know, the matter of poverty is very deep. Poverty is not just a lack of money. It is a lack in the mind. Now, when somebody sees a rich man's child, the person associates the wealth with the body size of the child of the rich man and considers that the availability of money is that body size.
Mm.
And then thinks that that is good. Of course, money is good. But that body size of a rich man's child may likely be obesity. But you don't see it as a disease condition because the child is still jumping around and wearing nice dress. So we see that as good money, good body structure, looks beautiful. And the interesting thing is that obesity in childhood, sometimes they make the child look beautiful because the child is plumpy, is well fed, so to speak. You say, this
Yeah.
child is very, very nice looking.
Making grandmother cheeks.
Exactly. So that is poverty of thought because we don't understand that that child is just a matter of time. A lot of metabolic problem begins to happen. The rich man will not come and tell you he's visiting the obesity clinic. What you only see across the fence is a nice Tesla and a little child jumping out. I say, car. He say money is good. Pa. On the other hand, the poor young boys always looking for something to turn into a football. Either it's a rag they tie together. They are not sitting down. They are always active. The only problem is that they don't have good diet, right? But they are very active. They are skinny. In that population, there are certain conditions you don't find because it is impossible for them they don't have the substrate to create a metabolic problem because in fact, they don't have good food in the first place. Number two, they are exercising. They are always playing because there's nothing to do. They don't have light. They don't have anything. They are always in the nature, in the environment, turning the highway into a football pitch right here. Those are the kind of, they are very healthy. They are very healthy. Now, this is how you know. When those children in the poor neighborhood, when they grow up and they go to school and they struggle to go abroad, they don't fall sick abroad. They can stay for many years without visiting the hospital one day. And that is a concept called the healthy migration effect. They come to a country where there is good health system, good food and everything. They are healthy. Now a problem starts when they give birth to their own children. Their own children start enjoying what they have labored for. It's fine. But their children will not be as healthy as themselves because their children have not played on the highway. They've not turned anything into soccer. Do you understand? They just sleep and wake up, everything is cozy and everything. And then they begin to look like the children of the country that they have migrated into. So, because mama didn't understand that it is not so much about money, it is so much about the little you have. If it's good enough, you are fine. What money affords is that you are able to get help where necessary. But sometimes, as a doctor myself, many things are not cured. Many things are managed forever. Like obesity is described as an adiposity disease that is chronic and that is relapsing. When it is diagnosed, the person gets some management, he comes back, you try to lose weight, you lose it a little, then it jumps back and things like that. It's like a management forever. Hypertension, like a management forever. You take the drug, there's no cure. So even if you have money to buy the drug, but you'll be carrying basket of drugs everywhere you go. But those who do not have sufficient money, they do not have the problem of those metabolic issues. They have a different problem. When there is no money, there's no good water to drink. Then they have problem with cholera. When there is no money, you live in a place where mosquito will bite you because you can't even afford mosquito net. And then you have fever, we have malaria, you have all those kind of stuff. So you see that the problem is different. So you really have more of infectious diseases that can be passed from one organism to another. So you have that in a poverty setting, like no good housing. Don't like you cook with firewood inside the house with all the smoke and kerosene and everything. Yeah, so that affects. Those are the problem you have. In a rich man's house, you don't see any fire, right? Everything is induction stove and things like that. So those are the two issues that are different. But the problems as a result of a poverty, poor environment, do not drive the global burden of diseases. They are there, but it is not the driver of the cost of healthcare all over the world. What drives the problem of healthcare all over the world is cardiovascular diseases, type 2 diabetes, and so this hypertension, these are the issues, and they are
Yeah.
usually non-communicable. And it appears that it affects the rich people, the middle-aged people, and now is now gradually affecting the countries we call maybe a little bit poor. Why? Because now they are now taking the diet of the wealthy people. It's now pizza, now ice cream, it's now instant whatever. We don't know that the vegetable at the backyard is more fantastic than a
Yeah.
$15 pizza. Yeah. So that is the issue.
Yeah. I think I saw somewhere that now globally there's more people dying of overweight than dying of hunger, which is it's kind of crazy to think about that. You mentioned at the very beginning that there's not a lot of conversations about preventive measures in these kinds of topics and issues. Why do you think that is? I mean, it kind of seems to me for a lot of the issues that we have globally, it seems that we fall always on treating symptoms versus actually treating the cause of it. What's behind that mode of operation? I mean, I see this pretty much in a lot of industries, in a lot of health issues, but what is preventing us from taking a different path if we kind of already know from our own previous history how we usually deal with things? Why not start early so that we can prevent these things? I mean, obviously, I cannot understand this because it's not my field, but obviously, you have a different outlook on things. How do you see these things?
I think that money is the driver.
Hmm.
The companies and industry that produces either drugs, equipment we use in the theater, medications, prosthetics, that is, and the health insurance company, that's where the money is.
Yeah.
The bulk of their clients are adults, not children. The bulk of the
Not yet,
clients,
right?
yes, they are adults. Now, it is an adult that comes down with heart disease and stays in the hospital for several weeks, several months, costing money. That money will eventually find its way back into the industry because you'll be buying all the heart failure drugs. If the patient needs a machine, it is the industry that will provide it. So, in that sense, the bulk of the money in healthcare goes back to the industry. And because it goes back into the industry, they have a say. If everybody prevents heart failure from happening, the industry will collapse because there's no money. So that is the point. And the industry pays tax to the government. And so they also maintain the economy of the nation that they represent. Some industries are so big that they are bigger than their country's budget annually.
Yeah. That is crazy and insane. I mean, given that in a way you're sort of going against the industries, right? I mean, by trying to spread the word about preventive measures, how does that play out into your work? I mean, do you receive some kind of resistance for the work that you do because of the potential threat that it could have on industries?
Not yet, because my research has been in kids and not in adults who are the client of these industries.
Hmm.
So probably that's why I've not been brought into that limelight as an enemy of the industry. Not yet. For example, we published a paper where we saw that smoking cigarettes from childhood from the age of 10 continuously until the age of 24 damages the heart by mid. That is a very critical information because we have always thought that the smoking damage will be in middle age. The industry, of course, that sells tobacco products will not be happy with that, but they've not contacted me yet. What they will probably be thinking is that, so this person is trying to prevent our future customer.
Mhm.
But there is also a problem. Still the problem of money is that government do not close down the tobacco company. They consider that let's raise taxes so that eventually the end users of the product will have to pay more to buy the product. And then because the
Yeah.
money is now eating deep into their pocket, they start reducing the quantity that they are buying. Maybe eventually they stop it. Well, nice thought. But the interesting thing is that eventually the government will have more revenue from the tax levying on the tobacco company. Now, the revenue for some country might be as heavy as 10 billion US dollars or 10 billion British pounds. That's a lot of money that can solve a lot of problems. But do you know, when the same country investigate how much they have spent in the health care of their adult population as a result of tobacco-related diseases, they found out that they have spent twice the amount of money they've gained from the tobacco company. In other words, you receive 10 billion and then you spend 20 billion to care for the disease tobacco is causing you. Does that make sense? So who
Sick.
is paying for the deficit? The same taxpayers. Why not shut down the company and save the people? But people will say, no, that 10 billion, the way it's coming, we can use it to solve other problem. But the one we are losing, we should plug the hole. The loss is too much. This is preventable. So money is the driver, unfortunately. That's where the world is as it is.
Yeah, of course. It's always sad when I have these conversations about these kinds of topics, and you just sort of like, well, you hear these conversations online, obviously, but having them, it's definitely makes them even a little bit more real. Now, something that I'm been sort of looking into is to what does the educational institutions have a role in this? What's the responsibility of the education system to promote a better way of promoting healthy habits? What have you found?
The educational system is a fantastic tool, especially in molding the direction of a child's life. It's somewhat the stopgap in the deceleration into poor habit, into all kinds of lifestyle that may be contradictory to health. But you know, the time available to disseminate health education is limited because the children have too many things to learn. The curriculum is watertight, so much that a lot of assignment, a lot of workbooks, a lot of this and that. Then when it comes to health education, we just scratch the surface and teach it as a subject, not as a practical reality. In that sense, we are not creating enough time for the children to develop an habit that will influence their life. So the health education, the schools, maybe our religious centers, fantastic opportunities to influence children's life. But what they are lacking is not money, but time. Because the
Like
curriculum
maybe
is very,
time,
yes.
yeah, perhaps time and the knowledge, you know. like I mentioned, we have two kids, and I've definitely have learned a lot about. My wife is Finnish, so I've definitely learned a lot about how she was growing up, how she grew up around nutrition, her ideas, and those kinds of things have definitely helped sort of, well, better understand the needs of the kids to have them as healthy as possible. And also, obviously, seeing maybe a lot of the, I don't know if mistakes are the right word to call them, but when I was growing up, I think it was just basically ignorance. I think perhaps my parents and my family were too concentrated on just how can we make some money so that we can have whatever food we have available, that they don't really ever thought about what is actual proper nutrition. And that's understandable. Obviously, with education, you tend to learn, but at the same time, while you're learning, while you have access to all this information, now there seems to be now we seem to be like in a place where you see a lot of contradictory information anywhere about what truly is a healthy lifestyle. So it kind of seems that we're shifting from not having enough knowledge as to what are the healthy tendencies to hearing a bunch of counterintuitive information about what it is to be healthy. So from a scientific point of view, what would you say is the proper way of a healthy lifestyle for a child when it comes to nutrition?
So the interesting thing is that in certain society, if we use Finland as an example,
Mhm.
there are guidelines, there are nutrition guidelines that are completely based on scientific evidence. And these guidelines are information available sometimes freely to both parents when they are pregnant, to the nurses at the healthy nurse clinic, to doctors in the schools, and also maybe a little bit to some of the teachers in the schools. These guidelines also help to change the school food program in the nation. So, for example, they say, well, not everybody may have sufficient money to get good food, but let us provide all kids in a country healthy meal at least in the afternoon every day, once per day, so that it compensates for what their parents do not have. That's a strategy. And it's a strategy from the government, right?
Mhm.
Because in Finland many years ago, before certain research was conducted, they discovered that the nutrition was killing people. They were having, especially in the northern Savo area, they were having problem with heart attacks. Why? Because there's a lot of fat in their food. It's getting cold, so they eat a lot of fat so that they can, be warm during the winter. But it was
Yeah.
damaging their heart. So when they discovered that, they had to change the food system in the store. The government had to put a lot of subsidy on vegetables and things like that. There is no time now you go to the store without seeing banana or everything, and maybe even if it comes from Costa Rica, it will be there. If it comes from Ecuador, it will be there. There was a systematic paradigm shift that brought that
Mm.
to play. So it is a systemic issue that can change the nutrition of a society. Not all of these personal trial on Instagram or Facebook and say, eat this one, you'll be this, eat this one, you'll be confused because those things, they may end up damaging you. But the guidelines are there for institutions, for authorities to follow, to prescribe. For example, every school probably have a contract with someone who supplies their afternoon meal. The company supplies the afternoon meal. The company will notify the school, will notify the authority of the nutritional content of the food that they give every day for a week. And of course, somebody is there looking at it and say, does this make our children healthy? Now, no government to do that for your own kid. You have to take responsibility.
Yeah, absolutely.
But for the school, the government is trying. They can do everything. So what happens is that the parent should also get into the guideline, study it. And I mean, we have a generation of instant everything. Instant everything will never solve our problem. We need to sit down and acquire knowledge deliberately. It's there. So a parent who wants the best for the child will not consider that studying this is taking my time. No, if you look at the benefit you are going to have from noting the content in a nutritional guideline and then changing your own taste, changing your habit and things like that, it is transgenerational. That benefit is because the children will grow up and start teaching their own children. You have saved an entire generation. But we say, well, I don't have time. The document, 350 pages. Who has that time? Everybody begin to make excuse. Your neighbor makes excuse. The other neighbor makes excuse. What happened? We have a community of sick children. So we need to get back to the books. The government have done their part. It's not a law because you still have to have your liberty. But the government have done their part to put this free of charge for us to look at. Sometimes in many languages, languages of migrants, languages of many languages. And yet we don't read it. There's something in the Bible that says, my people perish for lack of knowledge.
Mm.
Look at that. The knowledge is there. We choose to read it. Then we are complaining that we are sick. So who is going to help us?
Yeah, I wonder, how does culture influence the way we understand health and the way we understand the raising of kids? One thing that, once again, of course, I can't help to make contrasts and comparisons because, like I said, I grew up in Mexico, but I also, part of my life, I grew up in the U.S. So, I mean, now it's arguably pretty similar how Mexico and United States sort of operates in terms of nutrition, but I do see a big difference here. Simply just, well, actually, while we were living in Mexico, my wife and I, like I said, she's Finnish, and we would go to the supermarket, and I had never met anybody in my life until her who would actually look at the back of labels. And obviously, once we moved to Finland, that's something that I noticed regularly when you would go to the supermarket. Not everybody, but most people, I would say, you would see them just reading the back of labels. I tried to ask this question to one of my university professors who is Finnish, and I said, "So, where did that come from?" She wasn't able to give me an answer as to like if it's something that was instilled in culture. She just kind of pointed out what it just kind of happened. I think people just started becoming a little bit more aware, right? But still, I wasn't able to find like a correct answer. So because she explains that, like you mentioned as well, before it wasn't like that. If there was some problems in northern Finland with obesity and with heart attacks, obviously there was a shift, something changed. So I can't help to wonder, how could those shifts be replicated and scale them into different cultures and countries? But I think, do we first have to understand how does culture influence our thoughts around nutrition? What have you noticed about culture?
Thank you. Disease knows no border.
Hmm.
The same hypertension is in every culture, is in every ethnic group.
Yeah.
Same cardiac disease is everywhere. The management knows no border. Now, what cultures do is to selectively ignore evidence and focus on something else, and then they pay the consequence for it. Finland saw a problem. They created money to investigate what the problem is. They got a recommendation from their investigation. The government didn't look away and hide that document under the table and say, well, we will come back to it. They decided to make a policy that will influence the entire country, the nutritional state of the entire country, as a result of the document. And then they began to roll out programs. And the programs was working. And people naturally imbibe this thing. And then they change. The same people, within a space of 50 years, they now read labels. It can happen to any generation. It can happen to any group. It can happen if we take anything seriously. So you see certain countries are very, very unserious. They will set up a committee to address an issue. The committee will take money and go and spend it on something else. Then they will set up another committee to investigate what the former committee was set up to do. Just wasting money because of unseriousness. And when eventually they've gathered something together, they will advertise it. It does not become a policy that is binding anywhere. So the problem continues. Not only that, people that lead countries should not be thugs, should not be ignorant people. They should be educated. Educated in the sense that when they see scientific evidence, they should be thinking of how do we translate it. Now, there is a way people who are uneducated, we think. They're always thinking of what will benefit them personally.
Yeah.
People in Finland, certain level of education, they think what will benefit us collectively. That mentality needs to change. And that's the reason why in certain culture, things don't move forward, because it's about, if I get this position, all my family members will have this opportunity. And you will see that to take care of one person in the country, you can take care of entire state, of entire local government, with the same money that is being used to take care of just one individual, simply because he occupies a position. Those are not nice way of thinking. So what happens if somebody has been existing in such a culture whereby there is no collective thinking? Everybody is about what you can get, what you can steal, what you can take away. Just as long as something is in my pocket, how will this one benefit me? You will not have time to read labels.
Yeah, it's true. I think also, like, I don't know, culturally speaking, the strong beliefs that we may have been raised with also influence the way we think about things and how we approach even sickness. Lately my mother has been struggling with health issues. And for over 10 years, I've always been trying to like say, you have to eat healthy, this is so that you can live longer, whatnot, and blah blah blah. And the moment she went into the hospital, it got a bit scary. And well, something that she told me kind of also like sparked this curiosity. She's like, well, if it's God's will, then it'll be what is God's will. And I was like, well, mom, I mean, I understand that, but you can't leave everything to him. You have to do your work as well. So, of course, I can help to think that if there's a person that thinks like that, there's probably like millions as well that would sort of put our responsibility to external things because maybe it's just too difficult for us to understand why is our own responsibility to take care of our body. When I think of myself, of obviously because of seeing through family unhealthy habits, developing diseases and whatnot, I think about my children. I think, okay, so what is my main purpose in life? My main purpose in life is to be alive as long as possible so that one, I can play with my kids, so that I can see their lives develop, so that I can participate in as much activities as I can, and to provide some sort of example, right? So I think that's also one of the things that maybe prevents people, doesn't matter what the culture is, to be able to take action. That's that's a difficult one to sort of tackle. I mean, one thing, there's obviously a bunch of problems that we can throw at it, and there's a bunch of problems that prevent this sort of movements to shift into a bigger phase. But until we're able to sort of detach ourselves from the very strong beliefs that we have about many things, I think it's going to be very difficult. Obviously, I do see as well, positive things going on. I think there has been some studies showing that there's less people drinking alcohol, right? So there's like a positive window there and a little bit of hope, but it's still a lot, overwhelmingly, the amount of people that are dying from pathological diseases. How, from a psychological perspective, what are some of the initiatives that you have seen being taken in place to sort of shift the psychological mindset of understanding what it is that we need for ourselves and for the future of our societies?
We have several facets in the society whereby information can be disseminated.
Hmm.
Certain things happen as a result of these things not passing through adequate filters.
Mm.
In every culture, in every society, there is an entertainment world. Now, there is a strategic information the entertainment world passes down to the society, and it influences a lot of people. There is a religious world. There are certain information that the religious world can disseminate. Why? Because in the religious world, there is a belief system, in so much that whosoever leads a religious society has tremendous power to influence everybody, because it is assumed that whatsoever he's saying is true, even if he's saying nonsense. Now, there is a way the government can help to use this platform to disseminate proper knowledge. For example, in the entertainment world, there could be laws in the nation that it is good for you to dance, it is good for you to sing, but smoking on the stage and singing is not compatible. You have to choose one. Because the people that will come and look at you will feel like, oh, for you to be in this thing, you are a very high profile person. That means smoking is good. That is their interpretation.
Mm.
And the next thing after the event, all the children, all the young people will start going. They've not smoked before, but because the high profile star that was invited into that entertainment, whatever, have seen that this guy is this big, that means smoking is nice. All of them start practicing it. Sometimes they will start with a small paper, wrap a small tissue paper. The next thing is that they are next buying the cigarette. That is a powerful influence. The government can come and remove that bad part. The same way, in the religious environment, the religious society, a situation whereby certain people will promote that go to the hospital, don't have a checkup. It is God's will whatsoever happen, Well, do you know, I have never seen anybody who falls into the water and lies down there drowning and say it is God's will. Everybody will cry for help because it's an emergency. Mm. When there is a small turbulence, if you are flying and the aircraft shakes in a vigorous way, everybody will call upon something.
Yeah.
That is our nature. So these are the packages of influence that we have on people to change and modify what they believe. Because people can be sincerely ignorant, because the person who is leading their sphere of influence is also ignorant himself. So there are people that, for example, let's say let's use church, for example. Let's say in some of their services, they serve alcohol as part of their means of service or what their worship or something like that. They may say maybe it's just a small drop, just a small cup of alcohol. They serve it. Now, people who are not alcoholic taste that every Sunday. After a while, they will go and buy it themselves.
Mm.
Do you see? Those are subtle influences. And they say, well, if it's good, my church can service, even though it's just a small cup, it does not make anybody drunk. And then I can also have it in my fridge. What if it was not there in the church? They won't think about it.
Mm.
This little bit of subtle influences by these parastatals, by these facets in the society, are also the same pathway through which thorough education, accurate health education can be passed down to a generation. This is how we can approach it. That the government need to be interested in what is going on. One and the last thing is that advertisement. When you want to advertise on TV, on any of these stations, a nice product that everybody uses or few people use in the society, you don't add to the advertisement something you don't want the society to practice.
Yeah. Yeah, obviously I mean, I can also understand why there might be some resistance towards it. It could kind of seem like a centralized government is suppressing and controlling all of the information. I mean, that's one argument that companies who are trying to promote unhealthy products could say, right? You know, where's capitalism? Where's free trade and whatnot? And that's the thing. Obviously, I think maybe a lot of the healthy companies maybe don't have as much resources to advertise in the way that those other big industries do, which is the most difficult thing. But obviously, it's very hard to understand where is. I like to think that maybe the main responsibility falls on us parents to starting the healthy pathways for our children to learn by simply just creating good habits around ourselves. Because at the end of the day, you know, they do what we do, they see what I mean, they speak how we speak, they believe on the belief systems that we have. But obviously, it takes work from any individual to learn what are the right things or the healthy ways to raise a child. I think obviously conversations like this are helpful as well. You know, I heard somebody talk about this. He said, you know, if if each person in a group of 20 people could have a podcast and have these kinds of conversations that can then be spread out to the 20 people around them, that would make society maybe a lot better place, right? Because then also whenever you have this kind of knowledge, I suppose the people around you sometimes are the ones that they most benefit from the knowledge that you have, right? So what could be some initial steps for parents that are realistically achievable so that they could get a better understanding of their own health and in essence of their kids' health so that they could take better choices? What would you say to them?
First, parenting is a privileged responsibility. And your first client in displaying responsibility will be the kids. And if any individual is not responsible towards the kids, then that is a double life because you want to be responsible to the society that pays you salary. Doesn't make sense.
Mm.
A child will not pay you salary, but that child is an investment for a generation. A responsible parent looks at that investment and considers it a worthwhile project to really pay attention to. We don't see children as one of those things that are in the house making noise. We see them as the extension of our own life. That when ours stop, theirs continue. And if we think about the end of a matter from the very beginning, then our mindset will shift. We don't focus on the now, we focus on the end. How do you want this child to be at this age? So for that, you change your approach. Before you have a child, you may be living a careless life, a carefree life, because you are the only person. But once you have somebody looking up to you like this, that is how the posture is always, because they are shorter, they are smaller. They always look up to you. If once you have that, then you say, okay, what am I throwing down? What information am I throwing down? What are they seeing? Then you sit down and say, well, I have to be a responsible parent because this is a privilege. And to be a responsible parent means you don't smoke and tell them not to smoke. They will be laughing at you. That's what I'm talking
Mm,
about.
yeah.
You don't drink and tell them not to drink. You drink, you don't, you drink and you say, oh, don't drink. That bottle in the fridge, nobody should touch it. Nobody should touch it. They say, okay, okay, okay. You go out. They say, what is in that place? So we have to be responsible. Our responsibility also implies that it's just like someone who buys a very expensive, let's say, device, laptop or equipment, and then feels like, well, I think I'm old enough to use it. Hey, you are joking. You have to read the owner's manual. You have to read the manufacturer's manual. Because otherwise, you only use only one or two functions throughout your lifespan, throughout the lifespan of the equipment. But it has more than 25 functions. But since you didn't read the manual, you are just on your own. In that sense, there is a manual that keeps us healthy. There is a manual we can read to improve our health span, to improve our longevity, to improve the health of the children and delay their time going to the hospital. So it is not the children that we read it, it is the parent. What does that imply? We shut down certain things that are distracting us from our privileged responsibility. Distractions on social media, contributing to what does not have any meaning to you. Those are the time you need to sit down and read and learn what will be the good nutrition for this kid. What kind of physical activity should I do? These are the times we need to acquire this information and then practice it. So you cannot be chatting on any social media and then you are running with your child at the same time. It's no, you will run in front of a car.
Yeah. And
So
that's
it
something that
takes
you see.
time. Yeah. It takes time, it takes focus. And unfortunately, many parents like the privilege, but they don't want to take on the responsibility. It is compulsory that if you are a parent, you merge and match your privilege with responsibility. Let's be responsible towards this kid and live what we preach. Then the modeling is easy for the kids. There are children that go to school and then they have certain health education or ethics and things like that. And it is challenging to them because what they have at home is completely different from what the school is teaching. And what the school is teaching is accurately correct. How to behave in the society, how to be moral, how to respect people, how to give allowance to people. When they come home, it's like a ring. The parents are punching one another. The child is confused because the child has grown up to think that that is the norm. Think that
Yeah.
everybody punches one another in the society. Then the school is saying, no, you don't punch people like that. So parenting is a privileged responsibility.
Yeah, it is. And I think, I don't know, like if we look back in history, I don't know if I'm right to conclude this, but it kind of seems to me that sometimes parents leave all the responsibility to raising and educating our children to outside organizations. For example, we trust the government that the education system is going to produce successful kids that can go on to the job market to perform any given job. We trust that the church is going to give them all the values and all the ethics that they need so that they can be a good human being. whenever I made that realization, I thought, well, I'm not really sure I can live 100% with that. I do think, well, those are helpful tools for a parent to use. Additionally, like we just talked, I think the main responsibility is ours. I think it's very important to question what is the education that is being given from the education system. Question our kids about those things. Because I think part of the education system is failing us in a way because the main objective is to produce factory workers. It hasn't changed so much from the face into what it is now. There might be slight changes as to learning to utilize the current technologies. But if we think of critical thinking, like real critical thinking as to what it is that you want out of your life and how can you be productive with it? How can you explore your curiosity? How can you learn to question things in a safe environment and not be punished for you pursuing your curiosity? And I think those are some of the responsibilities that us parents have also as a privilege. Not to leave everything 100% to outsourcing organizations to educate our kids. Because if we don't educate them, social media will, the streets will. And well, I think that's just a recipe for disaster. We do have to be as involved as possible, open up the communication, get over our own misconceptions about certain topics or taboos that may be uncomfortable because those set of beliefs were implanted to us by our parents, and it's just sort of like an ongoing cycle from generation to generation. But it is a responsibility to understand from those practices and teachings what is helpful, what is not, and what should we focus on to the kids. Because I think part of that process is also accepting that we have been wrong in the past. And, for us humans, that's very difficult to understand and to accept that we have been wrong in the past. It's very difficult. So, could that be one of the very first steps to sort of understand and learn we have been getting this wrong for a very long time? We need to make those shifts.
Absolutely, I do agree. One point that you raised a little bit is that there is a generational shift, especially the advent of technology. In the years when there were no cell phones, in the evenings, parents gather their children, they just chat, talk about moonlight tales, interact. They're always around the family. They're always, now these days, because now cell phones are cheap and your bank or whatever force you to buy a new phone saying they can't update that one anymore because the platform is not updated. So you have beautiful phones in the house, sound phones, but because they're not updated, then now you have kids at home. They have access now to these phones because they're not useful to you anymore. They don't need so much, but of course, they don't have bank account or whatever to use the phone with. Then you begin to see children, 7 years, 8 years, going to school with heavy phones.
Yeah.
It's a trouble. Why? Because when
Yeah.
they come back home, the father carries his own Jaguar phone, the child carries his own BF phone, everybody carries phone, everybody is there for 3 hours talking to we don't know who in the sky, in the cloud.
Yeah. Talking to strangers from around the world.
We're in serious trouble. Virtual reality playing out. And
Yeah.
this is the time we need to interact with the kid. By the time everybody is exhausted, have you eaten? Order for pizza. Have you then go and take your bed and sleep? That's the end. Day and night. We do that every time. Then the children grow up into someone we don't know, into a people that don't have a character that is from the house. And you start wondering, where did all of this come from? We can't, like you said, we can't give the government 100% responsibility to take care of the children that you brought into this world. It was not the government that brought them into this world. It was you. So on and so forth. So we need to make amend. We need to repent. Our ways are not good. We have imbibed actions that are corrupting the good things that could happen in the future and change our modus operandi, our mode of operation. We have to be able to bring back some good things from the old era. We have to create a phoneless home in the house. We have to create, we have to be deliberate. It's just like no matter how much a policeman is your friend, if he tests your breath and there's alcohol there, he will arrest you and give you fine, even if it's your neighbor.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Why? Because he does not want you to be a danger to yourself and a danger to society. Every parent should have that privileged responsibility to create a child that will not be a danger to themselves and to the society by just taking certain things away, limiting the phone
yeah,
use and things like that, and then begin to relate with them as a person, not virtual reality, as a person, as a human being, and talk to them, interact with them. I remember a story of a man I was talking with some years ago, and we were just discussing, and he was telling me about raising his own child. And then I just gave an advice that he should probably think about reducing the hours on video games so that there could be a personal interaction with the young guy. He's very still a small boy. He was offended. But he felt like, well,
uh,
how can I suggest what he should do in his house? I said, no problem. 2 or 3 years later, we met again in the city. And he said, well, Andrew, I need to tell you something I learned from my mistake. I said, what happened? He said, do you know that one day I just came randomly from the office and I sat down with a young guy, my son, playing his video games. And the video games, he has been playing it for many hours and for several days, getting from one stage to another, this kind of stuff. Till
yeah,
he got to a point that after he has crossed so many levels, there was a corrupting influence at the end of the video game, for which he had to break the entire thing into pieces on that day. Supposing he was not there, he would have missed that influence of that child. And he would not know when that child developed that strange character. It was very bad.
mm,
It was very bad.
yeah,
At the end of a video game. And so I think recently you heard the news, I believe, of a little boy that stabbed and three children in the school in this country.
really?
Oh, why? Yes, a 16-year-old boy stabbed three colleagues at school, females or I think girls. Stabbed them. Why? Because he said he wants to create a news. He wants to do something strange. He has written it. He saw it on the internet. What is going on?
I wonder if that came from wasn't, I don't know if you watched that series Adolescence.
No, no,
Well,
I
there's
didn't.
a series on Netflix called Adolescence. So it's about a boy who stabs a girl.
Look at that. That
Yeah,
is the power of the influence of the entertainment industry. The
yeah,
government, I saw recently on the police website, giving a recommendation published on the 7th of May, so about 15 days ago, that parents should pay attention to their kids, monitor what they are doing online. The first things are, what are they doing online? They should not have a phone in the first place. With the world collapse, they go to school, they interact with people. When you go to school, teachers will say, keep your phone, keep your phone, keep your whatever, we are here to learn. Distractions.
yeah.
There is a
And I think
problem.
that's
Yes.
exactly. I think you mentioned something key there. So something that we've been thinking about, obviously, we talk about these kinds of things sometimes at nights. Our kids are still little. And obviously, if I think of my parents, my mother, for example, well, she did what she did with what she had. But I have a little brother as well. And while he was growing up, I would say, uh, I think I think it would be important for you to like learn how to use a smartphone or learn how to use a computer so you know the things that my little brother is sort of getting herself into. I think that's one of the things. Nowadays, as technology is continuing to evolve, now we have AI, virtual reality, the combination of AI and virtual reality. I think it's very important for us parents and for people in general to have a full understanding of the capabilities of the new technologies that are emerging. right? Because what children and kids and even teenagers, whatever, because they are growing up now in that environment, for them is a lot easier now to adopt those technologies and to be able to kind of understand, but not fully understand the full capabilities, right? So I think our job as well as parents is to, okay, now there's this new model of chat GPT. Okay, what does that do? I think for us as parents, it's important to understand what are the capabilities of all those technologies, even play with them so that we can know exactly what are the things that they're going to be playing with. So that instead of somebody from the outside teaching them how to use those technologies, we are the ones that are presenting those technologies in a healthier way. And I think that's one way to be involved. I think it would be very difficult nowadays to keep kids away from technology because technology is all around us. We interact with it on a daily basis. But I had this conversation with Jessica Alexander. She's this writer of The Danish Way of Parenting, and she has this program called Digital Citizenship. So it sort of prepares kids and parents on healthy ways to adopt technology, how to use it, what questions to ask around those things so that the kid is able to use it in a much healthier way, right? Instead of just preventing from using it, because I think it's just kind of inevitable, right? In certain ways. So I think that's one of the things, and maybe that's one of the difficult jobs as well, because I think many adults don't really understand the capabilities of the technologies that we have now. So that's a tricky one there. It is our responsibility to learn what are the capabilities of the technology that there is now so that we can educate our kids about those things. But that does take time from us to actually want to learn about those technologies. Whenever I hear conversations around parents that talk that, the AI thing topic maybe comes up and it's like, well, I'm not really interested in those things. And I can't help to think in the back of my head, it's like, well, somebody in your family will. And somebody in your family will be able to understand it a lot better than you do if you don't really pay attention to it. Because then that's whenever we fall into those mistakes is that, well, I didn't know he was looking at that. I didn't even know that those things existed. It's like, well, you had an opportunity. I mean, I think before in the past, it was a lot more difficult to understand all the new technologies that were coming up out into the world because maybe some people didn't have access to the internet. But now everybody, I think most of the world has access to the internet. Most of the world has access to social media, YouTube, the news, everything. So we are all now getting bombarded with all these kinds of information. Of course, the difficult part is to declutter all the things that are not important and focus on the ones that we should maybe dig a little bit deeper. At least, I mean, I don't know if I'm doing things the right way, but I think that approach will hopefully at least give me an advantage so that whenever my kids are starting to play with technology, I can fully understand what those things are, what the capabilities are, and be able to post safeguards. Whenever you were just talking about the media and about the influence that actors or movie stars, whatever, that's something that me growing up, there wasn't a lot of attention being put towards that. Like, what are the things that a kid should be watching? Whereas nowadays, of course, we have to pay attention. What are the things that the kid is watching, right? Because the kids don't yet understand the difference between reality and fiction. What they see, to them, it's real. So that could lead to those issues that you were just mentioning that just happened in the news. Those ideas are coming from somewhere. They don't just pop out of nowhere. And like you said, it's just parent oversight that needs to maybe improve a little bit more. And obviously open up the communication with kids, learn to communicate with them in a proper way so that they can understand. But Dr. Andrew, what would be your optimistic message to the world so that we can start making a better shift to better understanding the health, not only metabolically, but also psychologically of our kids?
I would say that let's give room for kids to be kids. Kids are not tiny adults, they are kids. We face an epidemic in our generation that wants to take away kids from kids. That's where this technology comes in. For the fact that we have more cars in our society than we used to have 50 years ago does not make a 10-year-old child have a driving license to be a danger to everybody. AI and technology is like that. Let's allow children to be children. When they have gotten to a point of maturity, then together we can learn the use of certain things. But when children are exposed to these things very early in life, it affects their development themselves because they start taking responsibility prematurely. And their level of understanding is very limited. A child can tell you yes, 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 but has no idea of what he's saying yes to. How you think you have communicated? Many things are highly preventable. Prevention is better than cure. Those external influences, you will not be there every time. But if a child has grown to a point of having understanding, that's why in the court of law, there is something called minor for an offender. Because a minor is a minor. The ability to appreciate things, understand things, make sensible decisions is limited. So you say minor. So if the person commits a very terrible crime, you just give a very tiny punishment because you say this is still a minor. By law, we should imbibe those things and bring it back into parenting. We shouldn't give things that are for the majors, for the adults, for things like that to kids and say, let us teach them how to manage it. No, you don't put a car in front of a 9-year-old and start driving because me, I'm the father. I will sit beside you. I will tell you where to go. That is a coffin in the making. So let us find a balance. Let's allow children to be just kids. I remember we're flying one of those days and a 4 or 5-year-old child was screaming heavily in the aircraft. Why? Because the father took away the tablet from the child. It's a disaster. It's a disaster. That child is now developing a character, tantrums, and because of tablet. Meanwhile, the child should just be carrying toys around. And you see tablet with a powerful headphone, the child is blocked away from physical reality. The child is taken into a world unknown and interacting with, you see, it's a serious dilemma. Parents, let's allow children to be children. Let's delay certain gratification. The children may want it. We say, we will give you when you get to this age. We want you just to grow more, just to develop some capacity. Let us teach you more. Let us interact with you more. Then you will be able to undo things very easily. There is no champion in AI. Today you see a champion, tomorrow is beaten down by another champion. So you will always learn it along the way. That's life. That is the technology we are in. It's normal. There's nothing like, I'm smarter than you because I've been using phone for 20 years. You are a joker. Somebody who uses it for 2 weeks will be better than you. Just a matter of how you apply yourself. So, parents, I want to plead. Let's allow children to be children. Let us make them play on the playground. Let them play with toys. Buy books for them. Let them read storybooks. Let them be children. Let us not say, well, because I need time for myself, you just dash the child a phone to just be doing what he likes. That's dangerous. Because, like you said, the child will be influenced by something else. The child is being parented on social media. What is the use of a child, an 8-year-old child, having Instagram account, WhatsApp account, hold the account. You tell me to what benefit? And in there, certain things will be featuring. Say, okay, go to this link. Then you begin to see connections with people that are very strange. We can prevent that. Because if the child does not have that phone, all of the consequences will never occur. Let us delay this gratification. This is also some of the reasons why in a bank system, the bank does not send an ATM card to an 8-year-old. I mean, these are things happening in society. Yes. To prevent man from doing something that is not intelligible. Let us protect our own kids. Let us not begin to say, my neighbor's children, now they have this, therefore you have to do that for your. No, that's not the best. You don't know their story. You are responsible to your own kids. Be the future that you want them to be. Create that role. Stay with them. Play with them. Teach them. Then psychologically they will start developing. Then children will be able to trust you. You should be the first confidant. Fight for your kids. Protect them. Somebody else outside of the family should not be a confidant for a child. The child should be able to assess the parent first. In fact, disbelieve what any other person tells you about the child and believe the child first. Let the child have confidence in the parent. Every time you start, somebody says, oh, your child did this. You say, wait, let me talk to my child first. That begins to give that child confidence that daddy believes in me. Yes, even if I do something wrong, he will correct me, I know, but I am not afraid of him. Let's create that atmosphere. It's a psychological warfare we are fighting in our time to seize our children from us. We need to fight back because the situation is very dire. And if that is the case, we have to give it what it is. Because tough time produce tough people. Unfortunately, why producing tough people produce easy times. That is where we are in. And easy times produce very weak generation. Let us be tough. Let us beat back this wave and save our kids from unhealthy influence, nutritional influence, all kinds of influences, IT influences, and let's allow the children to grow under an atmosphere that is natural. And then at the right time, we can begin to introduce them to this, and then they have understanding why we need to use it, for what purpose, what we need to prevent, and you'll be surprised. The children will begin to teach their colleagues and tell them, you have been exposed too early. That's why you don't even have your own personal common sense. Any small thing, you go and ask ChatGPT, okay, what is your brain meant for?
Yeah, I completely agree. Dr. Agbaje, I think there's no better way to end this. I really appreciate the work that you're doing and the input that you are producing into these kinds of topics. Where can people keep up with your work?
Yes, so I have my profile on the university. Just type my name, Andrew Agbaje, and then we have a website where we also release new research and how we try to interpret it for public health education. So the website is urFIT-child. So urFIT, URFIT, then hyphen child, FIT, CHILD, child, urFIT-child.com. So you will see a lot of the research that we are publishing and how we try to translate information for public health education. Yes.
Thank you so much once again. All right, then. Bye,
Thank you.
everybody.